Hello, everybody, and welcome back to tracking our local shifting real estate market here in southern New Jersey, Burlington, Camden, Gloucester counties, 900,000 and below. And today we got week 12 of March, and I'm going to give you my first impressions of the National Association of Realtors settlement against the class action lawsuit and claims of commission fixing and all the things that got involved with that. And, as of recording this, all I'm going to be going over are the 5 most important criteria that our company has been bringing to our attention and have sort of been the high level highlights pulled out from the various news reporting agencies and things like that. And what I'll tell you is this: what I've seen and heard on the news about this versus what's actually probably going to happen has been one of the most misreported and just irresponsible ways that our fun mainstream media gets to really spin some minor changes that they're claiming to be overly massive. And don't get me wrong, it will change the way real estate's done, but I don't think it's going to be nearly as scary, confusing, difficult as people are making it out to be. So let's run through what we got for today, and then we'll jump into that stuff. So week 12 of March here. The one thing that I have been enjoying seeing over these last couple of weeks is really good new listing activity. That has been this is the cure right here. What's in blue? This is the cure for everything we got going on this year. As long as we can keep this number up, I don't care what happens with this NAR suit. I don't care what happens with interest rates. I don't care about any of that stuff. As long as we can keep new listings up at this 300 or more mark, like that will solve a lot of issues, right? Revenue solves all business problems, while new listing solves all marketplace problems. So that I do like to see. I did see that our pending was actually up over our new listings this week, so that's okay. It's nice to see that we've had that many pending this year. It's actually the highest that we've had. Oh, geez, is that the highest that we've had? Have I missed that? That is the highest under contract. That's the highest pending number. You're seeing it highest all year. Seeing it live here. So yeah, so that 313 mark really is the highest that we've had all year for pending. I don't have to keep going over that. We did see our closed units still around 250, but that's fine. I mean, again, we're kind of taking the closed numbers from where we sat the second week of February. I'm still expecting to see that be down because, again, that was kind of that Super Bowl lull. So you think, okay, about a month ago, it's about 30 days. That's when a lot of these transactions were closed. It's a little bit lower. That's fine. Our expired, withdrawn, and canceleds, really low. Again, we're kind of in the middle of the month, not surprising there. Our price reductions, again, still fairly nominal, about 10% of total active listings at any given time. And then our days on market, still fast. We had kind of lost 2 days here, but we regained them. So it's the fastest that the market is operating all year. So we have the most properties going under contract. We have the fastest days on market that we have. All good. And unsurprisingly, we saw that our median list price, while it kind of shot up to 349 for 2 weeks, came back down to 340. And again, we're kind of back to that 344.9. Expect to see some pinballing here between 340, 349. We might even eclipse 350 for a second and then have it come back down. But I would expect we're going to stay around that range for now. Again, we're wanting and we're expecting to see the largest increase in the median list price when we see the largest decrease in the interest rates. That, for me, is going to be the most correlated factor. And we went over this last week, so I'm not going to go through a whole interest rate thing again. But as of March 7th, again, Freddie Mac website, you can go on this yourself and go to the website there. The 30-year fixed rate mortgage rate was 6.88%. And we are hoping, again, to see that come down. But with the election cycle being as weird as it is, this unfortunately being linked to that in some capacities, keep an eye on that. It's going to be changing weekly. But for the most part, we are still expecting a slightly lower trajectory for interest rates. Okay. So this week, stats, pretty straightforward. I'm all good with most of those things. It seems like pretty healthy for us in our local market. This is where we really have to talk about the differences in our local market versus the national market, what has been and what will be. We have to remember that most of the time I get on and I hear I have no issue with any of the news outlets individually. I just think all of the messaging is always in a worst case scenario, clickbait, let me get the eyes, so let me tell you the worst version of this. It's not really what's going to affect you primarily. The first part is, from a pricing standpoint, we're not Florida. We didn't have these massive new construction booms. We don't have completely changing insurance programs that are driving people out of homes and driving down prices. We don't have that. So stop taking a national markets perspective and then trying to apply it to us. And I'm just putting this on Do Not Disturb here and trying to apply it to us here in New Jersey. So with that being said, let's take a look at what are going to be some of these commission changes. This started with a court case called Burnett Sitzer or Seitzer, for a couple different ways, in the middle of the country. And basically, the gist was sellers all came together and said, hey, why are we paying for the buyer broker compensation, right? It was always this, hey, sellers pay for both agents' commissions, buyers don't pay it. And as a buyer, you get to skip paying the commissions when you buy the house. But then when you go to sell, you'll pay both the commissions there. So when you've built up equity and you are presumably sitting on more money than the prospective buyer buying your house, you'll have the ability to pay for both agents' representation so that you can have your representation, the buyer can have their representation, and it still gives an affordable pathway to buying a home. And that's the thing that I have the biggest issue with when I'm looking at this stuff, is that the way that it's written at face value, it is putting another expense on the buyer. In a 1-year period, when we saw affordabilities from buyers go from 19% of their income is towards housing to 29% of their income is towards housing, and inflation and everything else got more expensive. Now, because sellers have agreed that they don't want to have to pay that and they want the choice to be able to pay that now the buyer, if they want to be represented properly, they're going to have to pay that agent. That's the kind of face value thing. So again, small disclaimer here, this all has to be approved by the court. So while this was agreed upon, a lot of these settlements and things like that, this still has to get approval by the court in July. So it is going to be basically business as normal up until July. And then we'll see if this changes in the exact face that we're going to read it here, or if it will come with different stipulations, different asterisks. But we can at least start the conversation so we can sort of get ourselves ready for that time period. Now, as a buyer and a seller, you may decide it might be better for me to wait until after all this shakes out because I may be able to spend less on the home. But it also might cost you more. That's the thing. When this all comes down, it might actually be more expensive to buy a house as a buyer. So that's the hard part. Is like, do I buy before this whole thing changes and then now I'm going to be responsible for bringing those realtors? Or should I wait, let it all shake down and see what happens and then be able to get a house maybe at a different price? I don't really think that's going to be the case, but we'll see. All right, so let's run through this. So there are basically 5 main components here. So I have 1 here, 2 here, 3 here, and then 4 and 5. But you can see there's a little bit more wording involved with 1, 2, and 3. So I had to give them some extra sections. It also just happened to work out kind of well for the template we use for this. All right, so let's start with number 1, okay? Buyer representation agreements are going to be required. Agents working with buyers must sign a written buyer representation agreement with the buyer before the agent can show a home listed on the MLS, and agents must disclose the amount or rate of compensation they will receive or how this amount will be determined. So before I go into this number 2 and this number 3, well, all part of 1, I really should have stopped here at 1. A written buyer representation agreement. This is not new. There are other areas of the country where they do this as a standard of practice. There are people here in Southern New Jersey that do this as a matter of standard of practice. I believed, after being on a team that required us to sign buyer agency agreements, to then moving on in my career and recognizing that I didn't necessarily have to do those signatures, and that just explaining my value on a buyer strategy session was sufficient. And it was an at-will engagement. I only took on buyers that I felt were going to work with me. And also buyers stayed with me because they wanted to work with me. If they ever felt like I was doing a bad job or they decided they didn't want to work with me anymore, that was fine. They were free to go and choose whichever agent. Now, we want to have a conversation. Was I not on time? Was I not sending you what you wanted? Was there a misalignment of expectations? What was the issue? I mean, let's try and fix it first. But what this is going to say is that you no longer have that right. You will work with one agent and you will sign a written agreement, and that agreement will have, and let's go into some of the things that agreement will have. Okay. So the first one, we just talked about this. Agents must disclose the amount or rate of compensation they will receive or how this amount will be determined. So let's just put a pin in that. The amount of compensation must be set in the agreement, such as a percentage or dollar amount, and cannot be open-ended. For example, the agreement cannot say buyer broker compensation shall be whatever amount the seller is offering to the buyer. And number 3, agents cannot receive compensation for brokerage services from any source more than the amount or rate agreed to in the buyer's representation agreement. For example, an agent could not accept an offer of cooperative compensation for more than the amount or rate agreed to in the buyer representation agreement. So let's take 1, 2, and 3 here. First, we have to let you know how much we charge. This is how much, as a buyer broker, I work under, and I won't be able to charge you more than that. So that's kind of 1 and 3. First, I have to show it to you. And number 3 here is I can't receive anything more than what that is. So you're going to see a lot of buyer's agents probably looking at a number close to about 2.5%. Some agents will continue to try and charge 3. Some agents will be willing to go less than that. You'll have this spectrum. I don't think you're going to get a lot of agents who will say, like, I will work for 1% flat all day. That's going to be probably not exactly happening unless you're a brand new agent and you don't really have a lot to offer other than just being a door opener. Then yeah, hire that 1% agent and you're going to get 1% agent services. Number 2 here, the amount of compensation must be set in the agreement, such as a percentage or dollar amount. That's fine. We work for a 2.5% of the overall sales price. You may end up getting agents that say, I work for a flat fee. I work for $5,000 or I work for $10,000. In some of the luxuries, they may say, I work for $25,000. That's just what they're going to put. Now, at higher price points, it probably makes sense to do a percentage, whereas at lower price points, it probably will make more sense to do flat rate from the realtor perspective. But obviously, from the consumer perspective, they may want the opposite. They may want that the luxury that anything over 500,000, you're just going to make this amount. You're just going to make this amount. It's still a home sale, right? Here's your flat amount that you capped it making. Versus at the lower end, they want to be able to. If I'm going to buy a lower home, I don't want to have to spend more for that as a flat rate. So anyway, have to disclose what it's going to be. I have to set it as an exact amount, and I can't receive more than that. Okay, that's fine. Let's go to number 2 here. Offers of cooperative compensation cannot be made on the MLS. Remember, the MLS is the multiple listing system where all the realtors put all the listings. Agents cannot make offers of cooperative compensation on the MLS. So that means as agents are going on and looking through these properties and you have portals and stuff set up, we won't be able to see how much listing A, B, or C are offering us as a compensation. We won't be able to see that. And what they're trying to do by doing that is prevent steering. And the example I give around this all the time is, hey, my buyer shows me 7 homes that they want to see. And I go through the list of 7 homes and I see that 6 of the homes are offering a 3% buyer broker compensation. And then the 7th home is offering a 1% buyer broker compensation. Unfortunately, a lot of agents will look at that list of 7 and say, guess which 6 I'm going to show my buyer first, and only if they don't like those first 6, I'll show them number 7. That's a conflict of interest because now you're basing the homes that you're going to show that buyer based on your perceived amount of compensation. And that's not fair to a buyer in a true fair market. And so that will not be able to be made on the MLS. So they can't make off of that on the MLS. And MLSs must eliminate all broker compensation fields on the MLS and prohibit the sharing of offers of cooperative compensation in any other MLS field. The National Association of Realtors and MLSs released under the settlement cannot create or support any non-MLS mechanism, such as an internet aggregator's website, for sellers or listing agents to make offers of cooperative compensation for buyer's agents. This is basically saying, A, you can't put it on your website, you can't put it on the MLS, and then you can't make some third-party aggregator that then tries to grab all this data and allow you to still do what we're trying to do on the. They're saying no, you can't do it on the MLS, and you can't do it in some third-party website that allows everybody to have this mutual exchange. It's just off the MLS, so it's around the rules. No, they're saying you can't do that. Okay. Sellers can offer concessions to the buyers in a public comment field in an MLS listing if the concessions are not conditioned on paying the buyer's agent commission. However, as part of the negotiation of the purchase contract, sellers and buyers can agree to apply the concessions to the buyer's agent's commission. As a practical matter, even though it cannot be called cooperative compensation, the amount of a seller's concession can match the amount the seller would offer as cooperative compensation as part of the contract negotiations. To me, this seems a little bit like the layman's way of saying, hey, I can't publicly state what I would give a buyer broker as a commission compensation, but I am open to offering a $7,500 seller concession. This is why I scoff a little bit at some of these things, because we're still getting to the point of giving that compensation away. It's just being done in a more annoying way now, but it's not being specifically stated. And that's kind of what goes back to this class auction was a lot of these sellers in that original Burnett Sitzer court case said they never felt like they had the ability to negotiate the commissions. Some listing agents were showing up with that form already filled out of 3%, and they just assumed that was the cost of doing business, not that it was a negotiable term. And so what they're trying to accommodate here is saying, like, look, you can't just make it known what the commission rate is. It has to be negotiated on a per deal, per buyer agent basis. But you can still kind of get them the ballpark of what you're going to be willing to compensate if it gets to that point. So that's kind of what this one's getting at. And let's come down here to offers of oops, sorry, my mouse is skipping double. All right, number 3 in here, 3 of 5. Offers of cooperative compensation may be made off the MLS. So let's drive into this one. Nothing in the National Association of Realtors settlement prohibits sellers or listing agents from making offers of cooperative compensation to buyer's agents off the MLS. Email, newsletter, calls, texts, just make sure it's all TCPA compliant. And before listing agents can offer that compensation to buyer's agents, they must disclose and obtain seller approval for any offering conspicuous language that stands out and is clearly visible. Now, I'm just going to finish this last one, and then we'll kind of do this whole one as together. So on this third continued here, an MLS cannot require agents to make or accept offers of cooperative compensation as a condition to joining or participating in the MLS. And MLSs also cannot require that offers of cooperative compensation, if made, be blanket, unconditional, or unilateral. So what does this kind of mean? So I can contact and be in touch with all my other realtor friends, and I can have a newsletter about, hey, take a look at this new listing. Here's what's going on. By the way, we are offering a 2.5% buyer broker compensation. The way that this reads is I can still let other agents know what's going on. I just can't post it publicly on the MLS as a buyer broker compensation agreement. But I can talk to my seller, get their approval, and let them know that I'm going to disclose that, hey, yeah, you do agree that if we get a buyer and you're willing to compensate a buyer's agent 2.5%, great. When I do my marketing and when I do my email blasting for this, I'll include that information in that. It just can't be on the MLS. That's kind of an AR governed MLS, which we are. Okay, so that's a big one there. So it's like, again, number 2 and 3 are already telling you the ways we can still work around the first issue of not putting it on the MLS, right? And then cannot require agents to accept offers. That's just saying, if you're going to join our MLS, you have to agree to not work more or less than any. You can't make those. You can just join, and again, all negotiable, all negotiable, all negotiable. All right, number 4 and 5. Brokers can publish offers of cooperative compensation for their own listings on their own websites. This is the one that drove me up a wall because you have something like Zillow or Realtor.com, which is a listing aggregator for people. It's a marketing website, and I don't know if this is going to be allowed through that, but like Keller Williams, we have our own websites. And so we'll be able to put any Keller Williams listing that's up on a Keller Williams website. We can put publicly, hey, this is offering a 2%, 2.5%, 3% buyer broker compensation. I just can't have Weichert just can't put it on their website what Keller Williams listings are doing. So the problem with that for me is, as a buyer, especially when this is in the early go and we're all trying to figure out like, okay, well, is this listing charging it? Is that listing not? What's going on here? What is this one going to cost versus that one's going to cost? It's going to force buyers to now have to check every company website for every listing they find that their realtor sent them to decide like, oh, okay, now that I've gone to Remax.com or Weichert.com or KellerWilliams.com or BerkshireHathaway.com or whatever, they're going to have to be able to go there and check on these things. So again, like 2, 3, and 4 are all about, well, you can't put it on the MLS and you can't make it just totally open, but here are all the ways you can do it. It's just going to be more annoying and less right in your face on the MLS. And then number 5, agents must make commission disclosures. So agents must disclose in listing agreements, buyer representation agreements, and pre-closing disclosures that broker commissions are not set by law and are fully negotiable. The National Association of Realtors must require realtor boards and MLSs to include these disclosures in any form agreements they publish. So this is just saying anytime we take a listing, which we always did on the listing, and on the buyer representation, and again, we did this on buyer representation was just less common. You have to just make it known that commissions are negotiable. They are negotiable. They are negotiable. They are negotiable. They are negotiable. So, what am I taking out of this court case? Well, I'm taking out the fact that, one, agents will no longer be able to steer their clients to higher compensation listings. I think that's a good thing. There was a little unwritten rule as realtors when I gave you those 7 listings and 6 were offering 3% and 1 was offering 1%. A lot of agents would talk and say, it's unfortunate, but because we have that information, yeah, of course I'm going to show them the first 6 first. And agents kind of made up reasons as to why those 6 were probably a better fit for their client than that 7th property all day. And there was gray area there. There was issues with that. And so I'm actually okay with the fact that they're not going to be allowed to do that. Here's the part that I don't like. Again, a lot of this is going to become a buyer expense. So let's take a few examples here, and then we're going to kind of wrap up. So the first example would be, let's say you now go to a listing, and that listing is offering 0 buyer broker compensation. Okay. Well, if you are working with a buyer's agent and you've signed a buyer representation agreement, and that buyer's agent has said, hey, I work for 2.5%. Well, since this seller is not offering any compensation, you as the buyer are now going to be responsible to pay that full 2.5% to your buyer's agent. And again, you already have a down payment. You already have closing costs. And now you're going to slap an extra 2.5% on to your overall funds needed for closing, just so that you have an agent who will represent your interests as you go forward with closing. Now, you may decide, well, okay, that's a tough situation to be in. What if the seller is offering 2%? Okay, then you'll probably only be on the hook for 0.5%, right? If you go to a same situation, you have a buyer's representation agreement. You've agreed to 2.5%. You go and you find a listing and you put your offer in, and you see that the seller is willing to offer a 2% seller concession, not necessarily a commission, but a seller concession. And so you say, okay, great. Well, we're being offered that. We're going to request the 2% from the listing agent of the concession that they're willing to give. We would like to make that applied to our buyer's agent's commission. And now, since they're offering 2%, I work for 2.5%. You as the buyer, you'll only have to make up that 0.5% difference, which in a lot of transactions won't be that much. It'll just be a little bit addition to your closing costs amount. Okay, that will probably work. But I think the question that a lot of buyers are going to start asking themselves is, do I even need representation? This is where I see open houses starting to become more popular. You're going to have a lot more buyers that are going to go to open houses that are unrepresented. And they are going to talk with the listing agent and they're going to say, hey, we would like to put our offer in directly with you because the buyer may want to save some money. I'm not going to tell you not to do that. If you believe that the money, that transactional moment, and the risk involved with whatever's going on here is too much for you to handle, then maybe you can go to an open house and put your offer in directly with the listing agent, and that's fine. Here's the problem with that. That listing agent has a listing agreement signed with the seller and still owes them a fiduciary responsibility, meaning that that listing agent owes that seller a financial and moral and ethical obligation to get them the most money with the best terms in the shortest amount of time possible or in the time period that they need. You as the buyer, you can put your offer in with a smiling listing agent, but make no mistake, they don't represent you. They represent the seller. They are facilitating an offer that you're giving to them as an unrepresented buyer, and then they will run the transaction. During attorney review, they will not look out for your best interests. During the home inspection, they will not look out for your best interests. During appraisal negotiation, they will not look out for your best interests. Any other issue with title comes up, any other issue with anything comes up, they are only required to disclose what they are legally required to disclose, but they do not have to help you at all. And as a buyer, I've seen really intelligent human beings, attorneys, engineers, doctors, executives. I've worked with all of them. Just because you are smart in one field doesn't make you smart in another. I don't walk into a law office and pretend like I know what I'm talking about. I don't walk into an engineer's office and pretend I know what I'm talking about. Now, obviously, those are 4 to 6 year degrees that you have to get. Where real estate, let's talk about it. It's 2 weeks to get licensed. But it's not 2 weeks to be good at real estate. It takes years to be good at real estate. So I've been working in real estate every day for 9 years. So no, I've only taken a 75-hour course, passed 2 tests, and I've been a real estate agent, but I've also had to pass CE credits every single year. I've also had on-the-job experience and training for all those times. So no, I am not as accredited academically as an engineer, but my time on task in the profession is there for a lot of people. I will tell you that I am very concerned about buyers going for that lack of representation route, thinking under the guise of a smiling listing agent that they will be in the hands because they're saving some money because the listing agent has answered all their emails. You're not represented by that listing agent. They will not bring anything to your attention that benefits their seller if they don't legally have to disclose that. So what do I think is probably going to happen? What I think is probably going to happen is this. You're going to have buyer's agents who are going to reduce their overall commissions and say, hey, I'm willing to work for 2%. And they'll say, that's what I'm willing to work with. I cannot go lower than that. And I understand that to be competitive, I have to charge less than the standard rates of 2.5% to 3% that were commonly agreed to for a very long period of time, not between realtor to realtor, between realtor and buyer and realtor and seller. They had agreed to those commissions for a very long period of time. So you're going to get that buyer's agents. They're probably going to work those commissions down a little bit. Then as you go to shop for a home, part of the negotiation is going to say, hey, right now we're going to offer you a purchase price, an escrow deposit, a closing date, and we're going to request this amount as a seller's concession to help pay for the buyer agent commissions, right? So that's what's going to happen. Another fear I have of that is each loan type has a maximum amount of concessions that you are allowed to get. On certain loans, it's only 3%. Like a conventional loan, you can only get a max concession of 3% anyway. So if you're already taking up 2.5% of that overall 3% max and you're paying your buyer broker compensation with it, when you get to the home inspection, and if you decide to negotiate a credit in lieu of repairs instead of making the repairs prior to closing, you only have a 0.5% or 1% to work with now in order to get that concession in. I have a lot of concession and inspection issues where we have to ask for a lot more than that. So now you're going to run the risk of upfront negotiating your buyer's agent's compensation as part of your overall deal. And then 2 weeks later, when you're negotiating inspection items, you may not have the room because you've already used this concession amount too much towards a commission, and you don't have it to use for credits. And so that's going to put a much stronger pressure on getting repairs done while under contract. And it may also extend the time that you're under contract to allow for those different repairs to be made because you can't put as much stuff under the credit gap. So I think all those things will really start to come into play here. So I'm going to wrap this up because, again, this is just my initial reaction to a lot of the original language that's being put out. Again, I'm not an attorney. This is not a legal interpretation of what's going on here. I'm a realtor in South Jersey that is giving you my 2 cents of how this language is coming off to me. Number 2, this still has to pass the court. So even the writing that I've given you now, please check back on this stuff as we get more updates on the actual settlement because this may change. So, and as soon as I see any of that information, I will be doing my next week's video will be on any of the changes or any of the big updates. So I'm hoping that I can continue to become that resource for you of let's kind of track this together over time. And the biggest point, the biggest call of action is, do your own research. I just like to do my own research and I like to present this in a way that's helpful to people. Can I be honest? Yeah, I would love if I chatted with people after every video, but that's not the intent. I do want you to do your own research. I want to be as part of that research with you. And then if you do have more specific questions, guys, I'm available all the time for that stuff. I love taking little 20-minute, half-hour meetings, 45-minute meetings where we just hop on a call just like this and we can just run through it. And you can say, explain to me more about what this is going to be. Here's my situation. Does it make sense for me to move sooner or move later? Again, I'm always of the more consultative approach. I don't need you to buy tomorrow or 10 years from tomorrow. All I care is that you have the right information to make that decision for you and your family when you want to make it. That's my only deal. I don't really want to force people into homes and I don't want to make people wait too long. So I want it to be right for them. So do your research. Come talk to me. Let's break this stuff down together. I'll give you as many updates as I can going forward on all this stuff. But make no mistake, the one thing that the news articles to get right, this will change the landscape of realtor and how you offer and sell your home for years to come. All right, y'all. Have a good week. Talk to you soon.